Good evening, everybody, wherever you're joining us from, whether it's Boston, New England, Ireland, or further afield again. So delighted you could join us. My name is Leisha Moore. I'm Ireland's Consul General here in Boston, and you're very welcome to another collaboration of the Consulate General of Ireland in Boston with the Here Come Everybody Players. It's a very special occasion today. We are celebrating the centenary of the publication of an extraordinary work, Ulysses by James Joyce. And this evening's performance is just one of hundreds which are taking place all over the world to celebrate the centenary of that publication in Paris. It is also it's a combination of a celebration of Joyce and Ulysses, but it is also a celebration of Brigid's Day, because many of you will know that yesterday, 1st of February, is in Ireland traditionally considered Brigid's Day or St. Brigid's Day, and a celebration of women. And as you're going to see later on, we are also very much working into our performance this evening, a celebration of women too. So I just want to say, in case, I know that many of you will have joined these Zoom performances with us and the players before, but for people that are new, just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that all of the performers in this evening's production are performing from their own homes. They are not together, they're together virtually like we are all here together, using the magic of the internet to create a Zoom stage. And I think at this stage, the Here Comes Everybody players have elevated Zoom theatre to an art form. So the performance itself is going to take around 50 minutes, that's 50 minutes. And as before, we're going to have an opportunity for some Q&A with the performers and the producers afterwards. So do stick around for that, and you can ask your questions in the Q&A feature on Zoom, and I will do my best to moderate them and get to as many questions as possible. So just to say as well, this show is being recorded, and in the next few days, what we're going to do is we'll send around a link to the recording and a copy of the program to everybody who have RSVP'd. So, but for those of you who are joining us live, and it's great to see so many of you, sit back and enjoy what I think is going to be a wonderful performance. Thank you very much.
Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. The yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him by the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, "In troibo ad altare Dei." Halted, he peered down the dark, winding stairs and called out coarsely, "Come up, Kinch, come up, you fearful Jesuit."
Those were the opening lines of James Joyce's Ulysses, published 100 years ago today in Paris on February 2nd, 1922. Which was also the author's birthday. Ulysses takes place on the 16th of June, 1904, and Joyce starts this day twice, once following the morning of Stephen Dedalus, who is a version of the author, and once with the morning of Leopold Bloom, his modern-day Odysseus, whose odyssey takes him through the streets of Dublin over the course of this one single day. The next two extracts will give us a glimpse of the inner thoughts of these two quite different men. First, we will meet Stephen Dedalus as he walks on Dublin's Sandymount Strand, contemplating his aesthetic and literary theories, while we find Bloom at home in Eccles Street, more concerned with the thoughts of his cat. Stephen has finished his morning's work teaching in Dalkey, and now he walks on the beach, contemplating the nature of perception. In this episode, known as Proteus, the reader has access only to Stephen's inner monologue, his flow of thoughts, memories, and perceptions. Rather than a narrator describing the setting of the Strand with its sand furrows and boulders, a ship moving silently on the bay, we hear of the physical surroundings only through Stephen's thoughts. As he crushes shells beneath his feet, he closes his eyes to assess how the world changes without sight. Does the world still exist if he cannot see it? And what of this can he bring into his writing? For Stephen is a young man with huge ambitions. He is hoping to one day be the author of a book like Ulysses. Stephen's inner monologue is filled with a torrent of quotes and allusions, references to Shakespeare's Hamlet, or the distinction between the temporal and spatial arts. He considers the terms nacheinander, in which one thing follows on from the next, as in music, and nebeneinander, one thing besides the other, as in still life painting. Leopold Bloom's thoughts, on the other hand, veer more to the everyday. His appearance in episode 4, Calypso, brings relief to the heroic reader who has been in the company of Stephen's thoughts on Aristotle and Bishop Berkeley. Bloom is concerned with his breakfast options and those of his wife, Molly, still in bed in the room above. At this point, we hear less from Molly, she gives a sleepy grunt, than we do from the cat, whose utterances grow louder in expectation of her warm, bubbled milk. Ulysses is a book written by an author in exile, from afar in Trieste, Zurich, and Paris. But its concern is entirely with Dublin. The city of Dublin and its environs is as much a character in Ulysses as Leopold, Molly, and Stephen. Joyce takes us through from the Martello Tower at Sandy Cove to the school at Dalkey at the south end of the bay, on multiple paths through the city streets, and at the end to Molly's memories of the rhododendrons on the hill of Howth to the north. We begin now on Sandymount Strand as Stephen considers the modalities of the visual and the aural.
Ineluctable modality of the visible, at least that if no more thought through my eyes, signatures of all things I am here to read, sea spawn and sea wrack, the nearing tide, that rusty boot, snot green, blue silver rust colored signs, limits of the diaphane. Stephen closed his eyes to hear his boots crush, crackling, rack and shells. You are walking through it, howsomever. I am, a stride at a time, a very short space of time through very short times of space. 5, 6, the nacheinander. Exactly. And that is the ineluctable modality of the audible. Open your eyes. No, Jesus. If I fell over a cliff that beetles o'er his base, fell through the nebeneinander ineluctably. I'm getting on nicely in the dark. My ash sword hangs at my side. Tap with it. They do. My 2 feet and his boots are at the ends of his legs. Nebeneinander. Sounds solid. Am I walking into eternity along Sandymount Strand? Crush, crack, crick, crick. Wild sea money. Rhythm begins. You see, I hear. Open your eyes now. I will. One moment. Has all vanished since? If I open and I'm forever in the black a diaphane, basta. I will see if I can see. See now, there, all the time without you, and ever shall be, world without end. The grainy sand had gone from under his feet. His boots trod again a damp, crackling mast, razor shells. Unwholesome sand flats waited to suck his treading soles, breathing upward sewage breath. A pocket of seaweed smoldered in sea fire under a midden of man's ashes. He coasted them, walking warily. A porter bottle stood up, stogged to its waist in the cakey sand dough. A sentinel, isle of dreadful thirst. Broken hoops on the shore. At the land of maze of dark, cunning nets. Farther away, chalk scrolled back doors, and on the higher beach, a drying line with two crucified shirts. Rings End. Wigwams of brown steermen and master mariners. Human shells. He halted. I have passed the way to Aunt Sarah's. Am I not going there? Seems not. No one about. He turned northeast and crossed the firmer sand towards the pigeon house. His feet marched in sodden, proud rhythm over the sand furrows, along by the boulders of the south wall. He stared at them proudly. Piled stone mammoth skulls. Gold light on sea, on sand, on boulders. The sun is there. The slender trees, the lemon houses. He had come nearer the edge of the sea, and wet sand slapped his boots. The new air greeted him, harping in wild nerves, wind of wild air, of seeds of brightness. Here, I'm not walking out to the Kish lightship, am I? He stood suddenly, his feet beginning to sink slowly in the quaking soil. Turned back. The flood is following me. I can watch it flow past from here. Get back then by the Poolbeg Road to the strand there. He climbed over the sedge and eely oarweeds and sat on a stool of rock, resting his ash plant in the grike. Moving through the air, high spars of a three-master. Her sails brailed up on the cross trees, homing upstream, silently moving. A silent ship.
Mr. Leopold Bloom ate with relish the inner organs of beasts and fowls. He liked thick giblet soup, nutty gizzards, a stuffed roast heart, liver slices fried with crust crumbs, fried hen cod's roes. Most of all, he liked grilled mutton kidneys that gave to his palate the fine tang of faintly scented urine. Kidneys were on his mind as he moved about the kitchen softly, writing her breakfast things on the humpy tray. Gelid light and air were in the kitchen, but out of doors, gentle summer morning everywhere. Made him feel a bit peckish. The coals were reddening. Another slice of bread and butter, 3, 4, right. She does not like her plate full, right. He turned from the tray, lifted the kettle off the hob and set it sideways on the fire. It sat there, dull and squat, its spout stuck out. Cup of tea soon. Good. Mouth dry. The cat walked stiffly round the leg of the table with tail on high. Meow. Oh, there you are, Mr. Bloom said, turning from the fire. The cat mewed in answer and stalked again stiffly round his table, mewing. just how she stalks over my writing table. Purr, scratch my head, purr. Mr. Bloom watched, curiously, kindly, the lithe black form. Clean to see, the gloss of her sleek hide, the white button under the butt of her tail, the green flashing eyes. He bent down to her, his hands on his knees. Milk for the pussins, meow, the cat cried. They called him stupid. They understand us better than we understand them. She understands all she wants to. Vindictive too. Wonder what I look like to her. Height of a tower? No, she can jump me. Afraid of the chickens she is, he said mockingly. Afraid of the chook-chooks. I never saw such a stupid pussins as the pussins. Meow, the cat cried loudly. She blinked up out of her avid, shame-closing eyes, mewing plaintively and long, showing him her milk-white teeth. He watched the dark eye slits narrowing with greed till her eyes were green stones. Then he went to the dresser, took the jug Hanlon's milkman had just filled for him, poured warm bubbled milk on a saucer, and set it slowly on the floor. Grr, she cried, running to lap. He watched the bristles shine wirily in the weak light as she tipped 3 times and licked lightly. Wonder, is it true if you clip them, they can't mouse after? Why, they shine in the dark, perhaps, the tips, or kind of feelers in the dark? He listened to her licking lap. Ham and eggs? No, no good eggs with this drought. Need pure fresh water. Thursday, not a good day either for a mutton kidney at Buckley's, fried with butter, a shake of pepper. Better a pork kidney at Bluegax while the kettle is boiling. She lapped slower then, licking the saucer clean. Why are their tongues so rough? Do lap better? All porous holes? Anything she can eat? He glanced round him. No. On quietly creaky boots, he went up the staircase to the hall, paused by the bedroom door. She might like something tasty. Thin bread and butter she likes in the morning, still perhaps once in a way. He said quietly in the bare hall, I'm going round the corner, be back in a minute. And when he had heard his voice say it, he added, You don't want anything for breakfast? A sleepy, soft grunt answered. No, she did not want anything. He heard then a warm, heavy sigh, softer as she turned over and the loose brass quoits on the bedstead jingled.
We move now to the nighttime of the book. Stephen and Bloom have finally come together and end up walking back through the Dublin streets to the Bloom residence at 7 Eccles Street. Both men are dressed in black, Stephen still in mourning for his mother, and Bloom has attended a funeral of a fellow Dublin citizen earlier in the day. They seem an unlikely pair, differing, as the narrative notes, in name, age, race, and creed. Bloom of a more scientific and Stephen a more artistic temperament. But Bloom, who lost a son soon after birth, has been considering during the day whether it is too late for him to be a father to a son again. And while Stephen is at times preoccupied with anxieties and grudges and perceived slights, Bloom has the lessons of equanimity and empathy to share, qualities which might allow Stephen to become a person capable of writing his own Ulysses. Deep towards the end of the book, Joyce's stylistic innovations are in full flight. Here he uses the style of a catechism, a volley of questions and answers, which seem to give us as readers a vast amount of information, and yet this excess does not necessarily lead to greater comprehension. Bloom and Stephen are tired. Stephen has been drinking for much of the day and has had an altercation with a soldier. First, we will hear Bloom and Stephen talking together as they approach Eccles Street. Bloom realizes that he forgot his key. Indeed, that he had earlier remembered that he forgot, but then forgot that. So he must climb the area railings and drop down to the basement level, let himself in through the kitchen, and then allow Stephen into the house. The men converse over cocoa. Bloom sings a Hebrew song, while Stephen responds with the Irish song, Shula Roon, which we heard earlier on the flute. Moving outdoors, they are struck by the heaventree of stars hung with humid night blue fruit. Bloom has extended an offer of hospitality, a room for the night or even longer, but Stephen declines and leaves the residence to the sound of the bells of nearby St. George's Church. A light signal in the upstairs window, a paraffin oil lamp, gestures us towards the character who will end the book with her stream of thoughts, Molly Bloom. Awakened by her husband's return and his somewhat edited account of his day, Molly's monologue ranges from memories of her childhood to her opinions on the men in her life. Something of the tales of Brigid, whose day we marked yesterday, is there in Molly's enjoyment of nature. She is a Gaia figure, an earth goddess. Molly is the Penelope of the book, but she has not spent the day patiently and loyally awaiting her husband's return. Instead, she has been visited by her lover, Blazes Boylan, whom she compares disfavourably with Stephen Dedalus, who might at least bring some poetry into the house. And as for Leopold Bloom, her memories of the day he proposed to her on Howth Head provide the book with a final passage of extraordinary beauty in which Molly says yes to life and love. We're a century from its publication, but Molly's voice, her stream of consciousness as she lies head to foot with her husband, could easily be of our own times. Listen in now as Stephen and Bloom find their way back to 7 Eccles Street.
What parallel course did Bloom and Stephen follow returning?
Starting from Beresford Place, they followed Lower and Middle Gardner Streets and Mountjoy Square west. Then Gardner's Place, west. Then, with interruption, bearing right, Temple Street north as far as Hardwick Place.
Approaching at relaxed walking pace, they crossed the circus before George's Church diametrically.
Of what did the duumvirate deliberate during their itinerary?
Music,
Literature,
Ireland,
Dublin,
Paris,
friendship,
woman,
prostitution,
diet,
the Roman Catholic Church,
ecclesiastical celibacy,
the Irish nation,
Jesuit education,
the careers,
the study of medicine.
the past day.
Did Bloom discover common factors of similarity between their respective like and unlike reactions to experience?
Both were sensitive to artistic impressions, musical in preference to plastic or pictorial.
Both preferred a continental to an insular manner of life.
A cisatlantic to a transatlantic place of residence.
Both indurated by early domestic training and an inherited tenacity of heterodox resistance, professed their disbelief in many orthodox religious, national, social, and ethical doctrines.
Both admitted the alternately stimulating and uptunding influence of heterosexual magnetism.
Were their views on some points divergent?
Stephen dissented openly from Bloom's view on the importance of dietary and civic self-help,
while Bloom dissented tacitly from Stephen's views on the eternal affirmation of the spirit of man in literature.
What action did Bloom make on their arrival at their destination?
At the housesteps of the fourth of the equidifferent, uneven numbers, number 7 Eccles Street, he inserted his hand mechanically into the back pocket of his trousers to obtain his latchkey.
Was it there?
It was in the corresponding pocket of the trousers that he had worn on the day but one preceding.
Why was he doubly irritated?
Because he had forgotten, and because he remembered that he had reminded himself twice not to forget.
What then were the alternatives before the inadvertently keyless couple?
to enter or not to enter, to knock or not to knock.
Bloom's decision?
A stratagem. Resting his feet on the dwarf wall, he climbed over the area railings, compressed his hat on his head, grasped 2 points at the lower union of rails and stiles, lowered his body gradually by its length of 5 feet, 9 inches and a half, to within 2 feet, 10 inches of the area pavement. Allowed his body to move freely in space by releasing himself from the railings and crouching in preparation for the impact of the fall.
Did he fall?
By his body's known weight of 11 stone 4 pounds in avoirdupois measure, as certified by the graduation machine for periodic self-weighing.
Did he rise uninjured by concussion?
Regaining new stable equilibrium, he arose, uninjured, but concussed by the impact, raised the latch of the area door, gained retarded access to the kitchen through the sub-adjacent scullery, ignited a lucifer match by friction, set free inflammable coal gas by turning on the vent cock, lit a high flame, which by regulation he reduced to quiescent candescence, and lit finally a portable candle.
What discrete succession of images did Stephen meanwhile perceive?
Reclined against the area railings, he perceived through the transparent kitchen panes a man regulating a gas flame of 14 candle power, a man lighting a candle, a man leaving the kitchen and holding a candle of 1 candle power.
Did the man reappear elsewhere?
After a lapse of 4 minutes, the glimmer of his candle was discernible through the semi-transparent, semicircular glass fanlight over the hall door. The hall door turned gradually on its hinges. In the open space of the doorway, the man reappeared without his hat, with his candle.
Did Stephen obey his sign?
Yes. Entering softly, he helped to close and chain the door, and followed softly along the hallway the man's back and lighted candle, past the lighted crevice of doorway on the left, and carefully down a turning staircase into the kitchen of Bloom's house.
What did Bloom do?
Bloom set the candlestick on the floor.
Did Bloom extinguish the candle?
He did. And he saw in his guest confidence in himself, an equal and opposite power of abandonment and recuperation.
How did Bloom prepare a collation for a Gentile?
He poured into 2 teacups, 2 level spoonfuls, 4 in all, of Epps soluble cocoa, and proceeded according to the directions for use printed on the label, to each adding after sufficient time for infusion the prescribed ingredients for diffusion in the manner and in the quantity prescribed.
What supererogatory marks of special hospitality did the host show his guest?
Relinquishing his right to the moustache cup of imitation Crown Derby presented to him by his only daughter, Millie, he substituted a cup identical to that of his guest and poured for his guest this viscous cream ordinarily reserved for the breakfast of his wife, Molly.
Was the guest conscious of, and did he acknowledge these marks of hospitality?
His attention was directed to them by his host jocosely, and he accepted them seriously as they drank in joco-serious silence Epps' mass product, the creature cocoa.
Did he find 4 separating forces between his temporary guest and him?
Name, age, race, creed.
Did either openly allude to their racial difference?
Neither.
What, reduced to their simplest reciprocal form, were Bloom's thoughts about Stephen's thoughts about Bloom, and Bloom's thoughts about Stephen's thoughts about Bloom's thoughts about Stephen?
He thought that he was a Jew.
Whereas he knew that he knew that he was not.
What the enclosures of reticence removed were their respective parentages.
Only born transubstantial heir of Rudolf Virag, subsequently Rudolf Bloom, of Szombathely, Vienna, Budapest, Milan, London, and Dublin, and of Ellen Higgins, second daughter of Julius Higgins, born Carolee, and Fanny Higgins, born Hegarty.
Eldest surviving male consubstantial heir of Simon Dedalus of Cork and Dublin, and of Mary, daughter of Richard and Christina Goulding, born Greer.
Why did Bloom refrain from stating that he had frequented the University of Life?
Because of his fluctuating incertitude as to whether that observation had or had not already been made by him to Stephen or by Stephen to him.
What 2 temperaments did they individually represent?
The scientific.
The artistic.
What proposal did Bloom make to Stephen noctambulist?
To pass in repose the hours intervening between Thursday and Friday on an extemporized cubicle in the apartment immediately above the kitchen and immediately adjacent to the sleeping apartment of his host and hostess.
What various advantages would or might have resulted from a prolongation of such extemporization? For the guest?
Security of domicile and seclusion of study.
For the host?
Rejuvenation of intelligence, vicarious satisfaction.
For the hostess?
Disintegration of obsession, acquisition of correct Italian pronunciation.
Was the proposal of asylum accepted?
Promptly.
Inexplicably.
With amicability, gratefully.
It was declined.
In what order of precedence, with what attendant ceremony was the exodus from the house of bondage to the wilderness of inhabitation effected?
Lighted candle on stick, borne by Bloom.
Diaconal hat on ash plant, borne by Stephen.
What did each do at the door of egress?
Bloom set the candlestick on the floor.
Stephen put the hat on his head.
For what creature was the door of egress a door of ingress?
For a cat.
What spectacle confronted them when they, first the host, then the guest, emerged silently, doubly dark, from obscurity by a passage from the rear of the house into the penumbra of the garden.
Heaven tree of stars hung with humid night blue fruit.
What visible, luminous sign attracted Bloom's who attracted Stephen's gaze?
In the second story rear of his, Bloom's house, the light of a paraffin oil lamp with oblique shade projected on a screen of roller blind.
How did he elucidate the mystery of an invisible person, his wife, Molly Bloom, denoted by a visible, splendid sign, a lamp?
With indirect and direct verbal allusions or affirmations, with subdued affection and admiration, with description, with impediment, with suggestion.
Both then were silent.
Silent.
Each contemplating the other in both mirrors of the reciprocal flesh of their, his, not his fellow faces.
How did they take leave, one of the other, in separation?
Standing perpendicular at the same door,
And on different sides of its base,
the lines of their valedictory arms meeting at any point and forming any angle less than the sum of two right angles.
What sound accompanied the union of their tangent, the disunion of their centrifugal and centripetal hands?
The sound of the peal of the hour of the night by the chime of the bells of the Church of St. George.
What echoes of that sound were by both and each heard?
Liliata rutilantium, turma circumdet, jubilantium te virginum, chorus excipiat.
Hey ho, hey ho, hey ho, hey ho.
Goodbye to me sleep for this night anyhow. I hope he's not going to get in with those medicals, leading him astray to imagine he's young again. Coming in at 4 a.m, it must be, squandering money and getting drunker and drunker. I'll knock him off that little habit tomorrow. First, I'll look at his shirt to see, or I'll see if he has that French letter still in his pocketbook. I suppose he thinks I don't know. Deceitful men, all their 20 pockets aren't enough for their lies. Why can't you kiss a man without going and marrying him first? You sometimes love to wildly when you feel that way. So nice all over, you can't help yourself. Oh, I wish some man or other would take me sometime and kiss me in his arms. There's nothing like a kiss, long and hot down to your soul, almost paralyzes you. Then I hate that confession when I used to go to Father Corrigan. He touched me, Father. What harm if he did? Where? And I said, on the canal bank, like a fool. But whereabouts on your person, my child? On the leg? Behind? High up, was it? Yes, rather high up. Was it where you sit down? Yes. Oh, Lord, Couldn't he just say bottom right out and have done with it? And what did he want to know for when I'd already confessed it to God? Oh, I would like to be embraced by one in his vestments, and the smell of incense off him, like the Pope. Besides, there's no danger with the priest if you're married. Oh, move over, you big carcass out of that, for the love of Mike. Listen to him. The winds that waft my sighs to thee. So well may he sleep inside the great suggester Don Poldo de la Flora. I suppose there isn't in all creation another man with the habits he has. Look at the way he's sleeping there at the foot of the bed. Sure, nobody understands his cracked ideas but me. I wonder was Boylan satisfied with me? One thing I didn't like was him slapping me behind going away in the hall, though I laughed. I'm not a horse or an ass, am I? I think he made them a bit firmer, sucking them like that. He made me thirsty. Titties, he calls them. Stiff the nipple gets for the least thing. They're supposed to represent beauty, placed up there like those statues in the museum. Are they so beautiful? Of course, compared with what a man looks like with his 2 bags full and his other thing hanging down out of him or sticking up at you like a hat rack, no wonder they cover it with a cabbage leaf. I had a great breast of milk with Millie, enough for 2. I had to get him to suck them, they were so hard. He said it was sweeter and thicker than cows. Then he wanted to milk me into the tea. Oh, he's beyond everything. I declare somebody ought to put him in the budget. They want everything in their mouth. All the pleasure those men get off a woman. Oh, Lord, I wish he was here or somebody to let myself go with. I feel all fire inside me. Oh, it's a wonder I'm not an old shriveled hag before me time, living with him so cold, never embracing me except sometimes when he's asleep, the wrong end of me. Not knowing, I suppose, who he has. Any man that'd kiss a woman's bottom, I'd throw me hat at him. After that, he'd kiss anything unnatural, where we haven't one atom of any kind of expression in us. What sort is Daedalus' son? He said he's an author and going to be a university professor of Italian. I saw him driving down to the Kingsbridge station with his father and mother. He was an innocent boy then, and a darling little fellow in his Lord Fauntleroy suit and curly hair like a prince. Yes. I suppose he's a man now. Wait. By God, yes. Wait, yes. Hold on. He was on the cards this morning when I laid out the deck. Union with a young stranger, neither dark nor fair, you met before. I thought it meant Boylan. Didn't I dream something too? Yes. There was something about poetry in it. Oh, I hope he hasn't long greasy hair hanging into his eyes or standing up like a Red Indian. What did they go about like that for? Only getting themselves and their poetry laughed at. But they all write about some woman in their poetry. Well, I suppose he won't find many like me. 2 eyes as darkly bright as love's own star. Aren't those beautiful words? As love's young star. It'll be a change, the Lord knows, to have an intelligent person to talk to about yourself. I'll read and study all I can find, or learn off a bit by heart so he won't think me stupid. I'll make him feel all over him till he half faints under me. then he'll write about me, lover and mistress, publicly too, with their 2 photographs in all the papers when he becomes famous. Oh, but then what am I going to do about Boylan, though? That ignoramus that wouldn't know poetry from a cabbage. Oh, this lumpy old jingly bed. God. Here we are, as bad as ever after 16 years. How many houses were we in at all? Raymond Terrace and Ontario Terrace and Lombard Street and Hollis Street. Oh. And then the City Arms Hotel. And I'm to be slouching around down in the kitchen to get his lordship his breakfast while he's rolled up here like a mummy. Will I indeed? Show them attention and they treat you like dirt. I don't care what anybody says. It'd be much better for the world to be governed by the women in it. You wouldn't see women going and killing one another and slaughtering. When do you ever see women rolling around drunk like they do, or gambling every penny they have and losing it on horses? Yes, because whatever she does, she knows where to stop. Sure, there wouldn't be in the world at all, only for us. Oh, I suppose they're just getting up and chiming now, combing out their pigtails for the day. We'll soon have the nuns ringing the Angelus. Oh, I better lower this lamp. Get up early and go down to Lamb's and get them to send up some flowers about the place. I love flowers. I'd love to have the whole place swimming in roses. God in heaven, there's nothing like nature. The wild mountains, then the sea and the waves rushing, then the beautiful country with the fields of oats and wheat and all kinds of things, and all the fine cattle going about that would do your heart good to see. Rivers and lakes and flowers, all sorts of shapes and smells and colours. Nature it is. As for them saying there's no God, I wouldn't give a snap of me 2 fingers for all their learning. Why don't they go and create something? I often ask them. Atheists, or whatever they call themselves, go and wash the cobbles off themselves first. Who was the first person in the universe before there was anybody that made it all? Who? Ha ha, that they don't know. Neither do I. So there you are. They might as well try to stop the sun from rising tomorrow. The sun shines for you, he said. The day we were lying among the rhododendrons on Holt Head, the grey tweed suit and the straw hat. The day I got him to propose to me, yes. First I gave him the bit of seed cake out of my mouth, and it was leap year like now. 16 years ago. My God. After that long kiss, I near lost my breath. Yes, he said, I was a flower of the mountain. Yes, so we are flowers all, a woman's body. That was the one true thing he said in his life. And the sun shines for you today. Yes. That was why I liked him, because I saw he understood or felt what a woman is. And I knew I could always get around him. And I gave him all the pleasure I could, leading him on till he asked me to say yes. And I wouldn't answer first, only looked out over the sea and the sky. I was thinking of so many things he didn't know of. Oh, and the sea crimson sometimes like fire, and the glorious sunsets, and the fig trees in the Alameda gardens, and the rose gardens, and the jasmine, and the geraniums, and the cactuses, And Gibraltar was a girl, where I was a flower of the mountain, yes. But I put the rose in my hair, like the Andalusians used. Or shall I wear red? Yes. And how he kissed me under the Moorish wall. And I thought, as well him as another. And then I asked him with my eyes to ask again, yes. And then he asked me, would I? Yes. To say yes, my mountain flower. And first, I put my arms around him, yes, and drew him down to me so he could feel my breasts all perfume, yes. And his heart was going like mad. And yes, I said, yes, I will. Yes.
Well, there you have it, everybody. I was going to say, I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did, but I'm just reading all the comments coming in, and I think it's safe to say that everybody did. So with that, I would like to invite everybody, all the performers and everybody involved in today's production to come back onto the Zoom screen and take a virtual bow, and then we'll have an opportunity for some Q&A. So welcome, everybody, and thanks very much to all our performers. And here, everybody, I think that's all of you here. The comment box is, the chat box is inundated with comments. So, and mostly they're congratulations, but if anybody has a question that they want to ask any of our performers, can you please put them in the Q&A box rather than the chat box, so that I'll be able to pick them out from all the wonderful messages of congratulations that are coming in. And I think, just while we're waiting and give the opportunity for people to actually type their questions, I want to kick off with my own question. And I wanted to ask, given Joyce's innovations with the stream of consciousness technique, I personally find it easier to understand when I listen to people like you read out the words of Joyce rather than trying to read the book. And I was wondering, like, do you think, Carl or anybody else, do you think that James Joyce actually intended for these to be read aloud, or do you think I'm just curious to know your thoughts on that.
That's a good question. I guess he did, but and maybe Katherine, who isn't here, would be able to answer that better than I would. Certainly, many people think that it's much more easily understood, read aloud. And what's interesting for us, actually, you mentioned the inner monologue. Particularly when Stephen and I and Mary are sort of playing the character, but also telling the story of the character in the third person. So you're both being the character and transmitting the thoughts of that character at the same time. And once you sort of understand that, it becomes very a very good way of understanding who this person is as a performer, doing it that way. And I think it helps the listener rather than just reading it on the page.
Could I just add something?
Yeah.
I think that because Joyce, well, he obviously had a wonderful musical ear. I mean, he was a singer in that, but also the characters that he has a wonderful ear for dialogue. I mean, in the characters. So he hears them very, very clearly, obviously in his head. They come so alive. So I think that by reading them aloud, we allow people then to hear these, because he created these extraordinary characters, even some of the minor characters who have their own particular way of talking, their own idioms and that. So I think it's, I think he probably knew that they were very alive and people would connect with them by hearing them read aloud.
Another member of our audience asked, is curious about the choice of scenes, and was asking, what did you almost include but decide not to? And I guess I would add to that as well. So what made you choose the scenes that you chose for this evening's performance?
Well, early on, when we were kind of imagining this, we thought of the idea of 4 characters, and the 3 major people characters are Stephen, Bloom, and Molly. And then we sort of thought of this idea of adding a 4th character as the City of Dublin, because it's so much part of the entire book, every bit of the book. And then we tried to weave up references to Dublin into the piece we did. And once you decide on those 3, the 3 pieces are very much the 3 chapters or episodes are the episodes for Stephen, Bloom, and Molly. However, Molly's piece in my version of the book is 60 pages. Ithaca, the question and answer thing episode, is 90 pages, and Stephen's episode, Proteus, is about 20 pages. Obviously, we had to massively reduce them in order to make it fit it into a show like this. And that was very difficult, actually, particularly in the Ithaca section, the question and answer one. There's so much in there, so much information. And Joyce did a strange thing with the book. He tells stories about these people all the way through the book, but you don't really know much about them. And then you come to the penultimate chapter of the book, in that Ithaca section with the question and answer. He reveals all kinds of information that makes you say, oh, now I understand why he said that or why he did this. And so that was very difficult to boil that down to. I think the first time we did it, it was about a half an hour, and we had to get it down to about less than 15 minutes.
Okay, questions and comments are coming in thick and fast, so I'm multitasking here. I'm going to combine a couple of questions. A couple of people have asked, have you performed in person and where are you based? And then somebody else also asked, have you ever done anything related to Finnegan's Wake like this? So I know some of those answers, but I'm going to let you guys answer.
Well, Donald, do you want to answer that?
Well, geography is not my strong suit, but in answer to the first part of the question, we've got almost, I think, 4 or 5 cities in the world on screen here. We have performed many times, in fact, I think over about 20 years now, live and on stage. And much as we enjoy Zoom, and in fact, much as Zoom gives us possibilities to perform that we couldn't do live, we're still looking forward to being back on stage. And we have performed Finnegan's Wake many times, and I'd become convinced that Joyce's musical background and voice and interest in music is very, very influential in Finnegan's Wake. Really quite extraordinary, the rhythms and the dynamic of a lot of his writing in Finnegan's Wake only emerges. In fact, if you learn it off by heart and try and interpret it dramatically, it's a long way to do it, but it's very rewarding.
So the short answer is yes, we have performed Finnegan's Wake and love to do it. And in addition, most of our performances take place in the Boston area. Live performances take place in the Boston area. But we have traveled to other cities as well, both in Europe and in North America.
Yeah, I'm actually based in Toronto. I'm the outsider.
Well, no, we got Paris as well.
Yeah, I'm based in Paris
Oh,
these
yeah,
days.
that's right. Okay.
But I was
Yeah.
based in Boston for a long time, which is how I got involved with these folks.
Right.
Okay.
And Lydia, can I ask a question then for you and for Carl as well about the musical pieces, why you chose them, what was the relevance to Ulysses in particular?
Well, I think there are probably about, I don't know, hundreds of songs and tunes referred to in Ulysses, sometimes very obliquely, just a hint of it, or just a snatch of a song. But Love's Old Sweet Song, the one that Lydia concluded with, is almost an anthem for the book of Ulysses. I know a lot of Joyceans sing it at Joyce conferences and things like that. And Molly refers to it in her monologue. In fact, in that monologue, she refers to probably a dozen or more songs. And I think Katherine mentioned in the introduction that Siúil Arún is one of the songs that Stephen sings to Bloom, and then Bloom sings back to him a Hebrew song. That was one of the things we had to cut, by the way. When we performed it in person before, we did actually a little bit of Bloom singing to Stephen and Stephen singing to Bloom. So I was glad that we were able to at least include the music of it in one of the interludes. So there's no end of music to draw from in Ulysses.
Right. No, I just wanted to add that Joyce's texts have such a rich soundscape, and sometimes the music is mentioned explicitly and sometimes it's just alluded to. And so this was quite fun because there was so much that was specifically mentioned by title, and a lot of it, at least a lot that we chose for today, was from late 19th century operas and operettas, just ballads, songs from that kind of, from those genres.
I didn't realize it's actually based in Paris, Lydia, but it's particularly apt given that the book was published in Paris.
Yeah.
As though we planned it, but we didn't.
Sorry, I interrupted somebody that was going to come in there.
No, I was going to say that there is a book. It probably was somebody's PhD thesis, and then it's now published. It's the Ulysses songbook, a massive tome, and you wouldn't believe everything is in there. Street rhymes, the whole, it's all, every single reference to any kind of music in Ulysses is there, and it runs to, pages and pages, hundreds of pages. It's extraordinary. Yeah.
Okay, I'm conscious of time. We're over the hour, but one more question that has come in that I want to finish with you. So the whole performance was 4 characters in Ulysses, and one of the characters was the city of Dublin, and it was really extraordinary for somebody coming from Dublin to hear all those names and really appreciate the sense of place. And one of the audience is asking, is commenting on the sort of the sense of nostalgia, and wondering whether Joyce, who obviously had been outside Dublin for many years when he wrote this, do you think that he was kind of motivated by a sense of nostalgia for Dublin when he was writing Ulysses?
That's interesting. Well, certainly as a Dubliner myself, who is not resident in Dublin, I certainly feel a sense of nostalgia for Dublin. And I can well imagine that Joyce probably did too. It is remarkable how his work, his writing, is almost entirely referring to Dublin. Although he brings in the universe, Dublin is always there. And someone mentioned Finnegan's Wake earlier. Finnegan's Wake is filled with thousands of references to Dublin and streets of Dublin and places in Dublin in different ways. So he certainly was living, even though he was physically living in a foreign place, Dublin was always in his mind and certainly always in his writing.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Dublin seems to permeate all his writing, even though he spent so much time away from Dublin. I think we're going to leave it there unless anybody's got any final questions or things they want to add. I just want to add my thanks to the Here Comes Everybody players. This is the 4th or 5th time that the Consulate has collaborated with you on these virtual performances. We've been doing a lot more virtually since the pandemic, and the work that you have done in helping us to celebrate Irish culture has really reached an extraordinary amount of people, not just here in New England, but far beyond. And I just want to thank you all most sincerely for that. I also want to give a shout out to our new consulate staff member, Liv Paolo, who was working very hard on the technical end of things to make today's Zoom performance happen. So thank you very much, Liv. You all might be interested to know that Liv also runs our Irish Literature Book Club at the Consulate, which is meeting virtually at the moment. And we're continuing our James Joyce theme with the novel Nora, which the book club is reading at the moment. If you want to find out more about this or any more events, or indeed any more of what I hope will be future collaboration with the players, you can follow the Irish Consulate in Boston on Twitter, or we have a monthly newsletter that you can sign up to. So there are easy ways to connect with us to find out what's going on with us. And just one final mention of another event that we have coming up to celebrate Brigid's Day. Brigid's Day is all about the celebration of creativity and leadership in Irish women. And this day next week at 12 o'clock Eastern time, we are going to be collaborating with the Irish American Science Forum for a discussion on women in STEM. So follow us on Twitter if you want to find out more about that. And to all our performers, I hope you can all see the comments and the congratulations that are coming in thick and fast. So well done, everybody. It was a really, really wonderful way to wish a happy birthday to Ulysses. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you.
Many, many thanks.